We are so excited about this fancy technology. And that lady, I think she might work for Google Maps that says recording in progress. Okay. Preparing. Sorry, it takes just a second to prepare. Sort of like waiting for popcorn, isn't it? It's always slower than you want. All right. So welcome everybody. If we haven't met, I'm Mayer Cunningham, Special Education Boss, helping families navigate and negotiate the 504 IEP process, and really anybody that sits at the special education table. And tonight we are so honored that you guys would be here. We have a special guest, two special guests, but our special guest is Chris Klein. He is amazing. You can find him at Lessons from the Big Toe. Chris Klein is a voice to those who have none, and a helping hand to those with disabilities. Even though he was born with cerebral palsy and uses augmentative communications to help him interact with the rest of the world, Chris used his first augmentative communication device when he was 6 years old. This allowed him to be mainstream starting in 3rd grade and opened the doors that nobody thought were achievable. He graduated from Hope College with a degree in kinesiology, which is the study of body movement. He went on to get a master's in divinity at Western Theological Seminary. Over the past 10 to 12 years, Chris has worked closely with people that use AAC. He was president of USSAAC, United States Society of Alternative Communication, from 2013 to 2016. This opened his eyes to the needs of people who use AAC. He's realized that the AAC community has a real need for a mentor program. And this has led him to form an organization he calls B, little e, capital C, capital O, capital M, capital E, AAC, Become AAC. He believes in building meaningful relationships with people, and while Become AAC has some success, Chris felt something was missing. He believes in developing language for a lifestyle. So Chris, we just want to welcome you to the show. Also, Dr. Deann, who is the premier expert in AAC and BOCD, and we welcome you all to the conversation tonight. And if you have questions, provide those to us in the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can. We're certainly going to have Chris back on, but we're so excited to have you on. Ms. Dr. Olenek, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Well, good evening and welcome. And I see so many familiar names, as I know Chris does as well. And so thank you all for support and for being here, and thank you for joining us with Karen for just sharing what's going to be a wonderful message and just time together this evening. So just a couple of things for you to note. Chris is going to be expressing himself in 2 ways. He'll be expressing himself live, which you'll see him later on. Those of you who are watching on the video will see him generating his own messages in the moment in real time. But he's also pre-stored his own answers to some of the questions. And we did this so that Chris would have an opportunity to share more information, be able to hear directly from him his responses to the questions. And so today is our day to talk about language for a lifetime, or language for a lifestyle. And so Chris is going to share with us his views on that, living in the moment for that. So let's go ahead and let's get started. So Chris, tell us a little bit about your current concerns for people who are described as complex communicators, or people who utilize some form of augmentative communication, those we call symbol speakers, as they grow up. What are some of your current concerns and thoughts?
What do you want to be when you grow up? I believe everybody here has been asked that question. I believe everybody here has asked that question. It is a question that gets asked a lot. And really, it is a question that literally can shape how a person identifies himself or herself. I have wondered how many individuals with complex communication disabilities get asked this question. How many individuals who use AAC get to dream about what they are going to be when they grow up? The promise of augmentative alternative communication has always been to improve the quality of life. It has been to improve the opportunities a person with a complex communication disability gets to explore and really have an equal opportunity in everyday society. Employment, work, and career are greatly valued in this country. Employment gives people far more than financial resources. It fulfills the need of an individual to be productive, promotes independence, enhances self-esteem, and allows participation in the mainstream of America. For individuals who use AAC, having meaningful employment is a major factor in life that the whole industry hasn't addressed well. A national survey done by Light, McNaughton, and Stoltz, done in 1996, showed that there are only 25 individuals who use AAC working over 10 hours per week. It's 25 years later, and little progress has been made on this issue. There are individuals with that entrepreneurial spirit. It's true many individuals admire people like Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Mark Cuban, and others for their entrepreneurial spirit. Individuals who use AAC may have this entrepreneurial spirit as well. They are people too, and sometimes people, no matter their abilities, have this internal drive to make something more or something greater than oneself. Employment is a start, but why not employer? Deann Bryan from Temple University started the Dare to Dream class for individuals who use AAC in the mid-1990s. Dare to Dream is a class where individuals map out their dream on what they call a dream board. Their dream can be anything that they want it to be, and then people help them figure out the steps to get to that dream. When I was corresponding with Deann via email about this class, she told me she asked a class of individuals who use AAC when was the first time they were asked what they wanted to be when they grew up. Everybody sat there quietly because nobody asked them the question ever before them. They never thought about what they wanted to be, and they never had a dream. If you were never asked about what you wanted to be when you grew up, do you think you would have had the same motivation to get where you are today? Would you have had the drive to do anything? I believe many of us who are familiar with AAC know motivating factors play a major role when it comes to learning and mastering an AAC device. I believe we have data that shows this fact, so why not try to take it a step further? What would happen if the individual had more input on an individual education plan? The law does state that this should be happening, but I don't think it's happening to the extent the Dare to Dream program is doing it. I would love to see IEP teams ask the individual, what is your dream job? And then put it into their IEP plan. I wonder how that would motivate a person. I wonder how that would do to the expectations we have for our students who use AAC. Rick Creech was the first AAC user who was able to become a speech-language pathologist. His first communication device was a hand-to-voice 110, just like me, but I don't want to get off track. I want to share what he shared at a conference. Rick writes, however, my parents instilled in me that I had three things that I would always be able to depend upon and to draw strength from. They said I would never be able physically to do all things others were able. However, I could do things with my mind that others would wish they could do. They said that if I used my mind, I could level the playing field. They said that I had complete and total control of my personality. I had the power to make the lives of others better if I developed a golden personality through I could interact with others. If my mind could level the playing field, my personality would draw people to my playing field. The only thing I don't like about this statement by Rick is it put all of the responsibility onto himself. However, there is no doubt this motivated him to reach for more than people were expecting him to achieve. This is where it has to begin. We have to figure out how to get individuals motivated so much that they can surpass all of their expectations, whatever their abilities might be.
That's awesome. And well stated too, Chris, and just the power of dreaming and the power of a question. What has been your personal journey related to motivating, empowering, and equipping yourself for your adult life?
My parents and family instilled in me an idea that anything was possible for me. They didn't say anything was out of my reach. Actually, it was quite the opposite. I am a baby of 5, and my siblings decided I wasn't going to be left out of anything. When I say anything, I mean anything. When they were jumping off the porch into 3 feet of snow, they were throwing me off the porch into 3 feet of snow. My brothers carried me up a 40-foot mountain cliff so that I could experience rappelling down that same mountain cliff. What does this have to do with AAC and employment? It has everything to do with it. My family allowed me to dream. I was going to be a baseball or football player. That was the dream. I was never going to be able to do that, but the dream was never squashed. This made me think about what truly I could be as I grew up. It motivated me, and I believe made a big impact on what I have accomplished to this day. One of the most common barriers is education. Education is a barrier, whether it's K through 12, vocational training, or higher education. The individuals who use AC have trouble obtaining the education needed to be employed. What are some of the reasons for this? The lack of support for individuals who use AC was the major reasoning. Education is still a barrier. At the higher education level, there is lack of support. The amount of work it is to navigate through the system at the higher education level is difficult for an average student without a communication disability to get through. It gets 2 or 3 times more difficult with a disability. So when you add on a communication disability, it's much more difficult. It isn't only navigating through the education system. For many individuals, this is the first time of living away from home and managing their own personal care. This usually means they are trying to manage personal care assistance, as well as trying to navigate through the higher education requirements and expectations. It can be achieved, but if the college or university is lacking the supports for an individual who uses AAC, it becomes almost impossible for that person to succeed. Is it really 20, 21? Am I still talking about BARR, barriers in K through 12 that still exist. For symbol speakers, Q, am I still talking. Discussing how we assess students that need AAC. I like, I know, yes, is an ongoing problem. But I am troubled by what is taking place in our school settings. Is it really 2021? Am I still talking about barriers in K through 12 that still exist? For symbol speakers, am I still discussing how we assess students that need AAC? I know this is an ongoing problem, but I am troubled by what is taking place in our school settings. At the K through 12 level, teachers are still having a difficult time implementing AAC into their classroom. I have met with schools that have evaluated a student with complex communication needs without any AAC device. This is a troubling thing because they are writing up an educational plan without really knowing where the student's language skill is at. I understand assessing students with complex communication disabilities isn't easy, but if teachers and others on their team are doing it without involving AAC, they are setting that student up to fail. Back in the day when I was growing up in the early 70s and 80s, language development was more important. That changed in the 90s. AAC has become all about the technology being used and improved. Language is left out of the conversation. This is frustrating to me because without language, how do we even know what the person can do? Yet, we are evaluating them and writing up a plan for them. Then, on the manufacturing side, there are a couple of companies changing up how they are organizing their language set. They are concerned about how the change is going to affect the person using the communication device. It is like me going inside of your head and scrambling up all of the words in your lexicon. Instead of just saying what is popping into your head, you would have to search for words because they would be in a different spot. Language is important in developing self-advocacy skills. Without language, these vital skills won't be able to develop to the best of their abilities. It is impossible to get through the education system when you are unable to advocate for yourself. If you can't advocate for yourself, living an equal life becomes that much more difficult. Finding employment becomes impossible because you didn't get the chance to be properly taught in school.
Absolutely, Chris. Very important points. So summarizing a couple of those, I mean, the ability to be able to speak up for yourself, and say what you want in an ARD meeting, the ability to be able to contribute to what your plan is and let people know what your priorities are.
Dr. Olenek,
Yes.
I don't know what I've done here, but it says second, like play. Do y'all all hear that?
No, it's not coming through on this side.
Nobody else heard that?
No.
Okay, then just keep going. Okay, I'm so sorry.
Not a problem. But there are many factors that you're saying being able to communicate for yourself impacts. And so vocational training and on-the-job training and job searches and networking, all of those are extensions of what you're saying. And just the application, though, of being able to advocate for yourself. But Chris, I have the feeling you're saving the best for last, or the biggest barrier for last. Tell us some more.
The final barrier that I want to discuss is probably the most important barrier. Time is a major barrier for an individual who uses AAC. Communication oftentimes is slow, which makes communicating very difficult. I believe I have read somewhere that an individual that uses AAC speaks at a rate of 10 to 15 words a minute. The individual who is using AAC is very conscious of this fact, which makes them feel very uncomfortable. We're living in a fast-paced world that nobody likes to slow down. When we are asked a question, we want the answer to be quick and right away. We also want the answer to be a very complete answer that sounds intellectual. A person who is using AAC knows he or she has to be quick with the answer. This is why the individual oftentimes tries to shorten his or her answers so that he or she can get it out quicker. By doing this, the individual may sound like he or she is an intellectual when responding. It paints a very poor image of an individual, which limits the opportunities the individual has to gain an education or obtain employment opportunities. This is why time is such a barrier to employment, among other things that lead to employment.
Absolutely. And your numbers are correct. And you gave us a good example of that too, when you went live with your generation of one of your responses. Very different timing than when you've taken the time ahead of time to prepare your answers. But answers in the moment are so valuable, and the complexity makes a difference. The number that you quoted, 10 to 15 words per minute for an average proficient symbol speaker, is true. And Chris speaks faster than that, but we speak verbally 120 to 150 words a minute. So even for a proficient symbol speaker, we're talking about 10% of the rate, and with a reduced complexity that Chris was speaking to. Oftentimes the sentence is being shortened. So Chris, how did time, communication speed, and rate of speech become such an issue for you?
Time is a barrier that we don't talk enough about, but it has been a barrier for me. I was pursuing my dream when I went to college. I had a dream to work in the sports management arena, so that's why I majored in kinesiology and minored in business. My plan was to go to Michigan State and get my master's in sports management or adaptive physical education. My advisor took me for a visit to Michigan State, set up interviews for me. We had a very productive day, and I was feeling really good about everything. It was about a month later when my advisor called me into his office. We had to go over the classes I was going to take the next semester, but he also wanted to talk to me about my career plans. He told me he thought my communication was too slow to become an athletic director. He brought up he thought my communication would be an issue, and I was going to have a difficult time breaking into the sport management arena. It wasn't something I wanted to hear, and I told him I communicate fine and walked out the door. I decided to change directions after that, and really not because he told me that. Later that summer, I was asked to share my personal story at a church. and it went very well. This was right at the beginning of my senior year of college. It went so well that the pastor paid me a visit in my dorm room the Monday afternoon I spoke. He thought I had a gift of speaking, and I should consider going to seminary to get my master's. A new adventure was about to begin. After 3 years of seminary, which included 3 years of interning at a church, I was ready to go out and conquer the job hunt. Well, the seminary called me into their office and informed me they didn't feel I was fit to be a pastor. They told me they didn't know how I was going to do this with my disability. I'm not exactly sure what they meant by the statement, but oftentimes I now wonder, was it because I talked too slowly? My college advisor and I have laughed about that story a lot now, because not only was he right about the sports management arena, he was right about every arena I have tried to gain employment. I have been in the final 2 in the job search process a few times, only to have them select the other candidate because I communicate differently.
So what's the ultimate impact been on employment for you?
Well, it has been figuring out how to work by myself and how to use my gifts. Well, it has been figuring out how to work by myself and how to use my gifts. Employment plays a key role in personal self-image and quality of life for adults. Social relationships, community involvement, financial self-sufficiency, and residential living are positive outcomes that have been all linked to meaningful employment. There is little doubt some of the responsibility falls upon the individual to figure out ways to put themselves out there and create opportunities for themselves to get employed. Yet, it shouldn't only be left up to the individual. It is important to identify ways that individuals who use AAC can have the opportunity not only to be employed, but to reap the benefits of having meaningful employment.
So Chris, what needs to happen to propel this conversation forward?
I believe in order to move the needle forward, the voice of AAC needs to change. AAC users have to have a bigger voice at the table. Manufacturers, researchers, speech-language pathologists, and academic professionals have to truly collaborate with AAC users. It isn't about giving the AAC user a seat on the board just to make it look good. It isn't about including a sentence or 2 in an article and putting the name of the AAC user on it. It is about really collaborating with the AAC user. It is time for the AAC user to be at the front, guiding the research. This is how we are going to get the needle to move forward. I want to encourage my fellow AAC users listening to make your voice heard. Question the research that is happening. Tell the experts they are wrong. They need to hear our voice. This means we have to speak up. I believe this is how we create a grassroots movement. This is how we change the voice of AAC, and this is how we get the promise of AAC back moving forward to living an equal life.
Absolutely, and completely respect you for that. If you were to sum up your current concerns into a call for action, what would you want the listeners to hear from you?
EMPL, employ, employment, is A, K, E Y C O M P O component. 2. Living. A P U R purpose. Purposeful. Life. Yes. Were. Is. Why. Life. It helps in every. A S P E C aspect of a person. Persons. Life. Yes. Were. Is. Why. It is. E S S essential. People. Who use. AAC. Have. To have. More. O P P opportunities. To get a job. It begins with a question. What do you want to be when you grow up? Employment is a key component to living a purposeful life. It helps in every aspect of a person's life. This is why it is essential people who use AAC have to have more opportunities to get a job. It begins with a question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
And it begins with language. And that's really where
Yes.
Chris and I kind of merged our efforts, and I joke that we share one brain, but we have one mission and one vision, and that's to improve language outcomes so that employment, relationships, self-advocacy, so that all of those wonderful things that we experience in life can be enjoyed and can be expanded upon. Chris?
Starts with language, and then the person can develop those other right important life SKILLS after that, but without language, nothing can happens. Everything starts with language, and then the person can develop those other important life skills after that. But without language, nothing can happens.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Language is at the center of everything that we do, and it's at the center of our relationships and our education and our employment. Chris provides you all with an auditory and a visual example of developing language to the fullest extent. Chris's language got him through not just a bachelor's, but a master's. So high school, bachelor's, master's. It also has led him to be a very proficient and prolific speaker, sharing his thoughts and ideas and feelings. You can have a live example of the timing difference in his communication, but the message, and when you hear the message, you understand the power of language, and that power of language for a lifetime. We build language so that we have language and that we can use that language. I think the other thing that I want to make sure that you, as the audience, take note of is Chris is communicating thoughts and ideas and feelings, and he's comparing things that have happened. He's using language for all of the reasons that we develop language. Language is not just about requesting preferred items. Language is more. Language is about commenting and questioning and answering and directing attention to yourself, but it's also about sharing information and about the power of asking your own questions and asking the questions of who you're listening to. So
to that, can I add to that?
absolutely. And interrupting, that's another skill that
Language is just language. Whether it's AAC or talking with your mouth or using body language. Language is important to develop, and we put in the time with our other students that may not have the severe disability. Why can't we put in that same time for a person with a complex communication disability? Language is just language, whether it's AAC or talking with your mouth or using body language. Language is important to develop, and we put in the time with our other students that may not have a severe disability. Why can't we put in the same time for a person with a complex communication disability?
absolutely. So before Chris and I get off on a tangent, which we are very likely to do, and I'm not going to say which one of us takes us on the tangent, probably equally as much. I'll turn it back over to you, Karen, for additional questions or comments.
Well, Now, Chris, I'm glad that you have mastered what I've mastered, interrupting. I have a doctorate in it. There's no paperwork, but I love it. So Heidi is gonna ask you some questions, Chris, that we've gotten from some of our platforms.
Hi, Chris. Thank you for joining us. So from TikTok, we have a few questions from some parents, and one of them is, how do we get, actually, this is from a educator. How do we get parents to get AAC when the schools say they are functional speakers?
Oh, Chris, do you want to take that or do you want me to? Because that's one of my favorite words I hate.
Well, do you want to say something first about how the school is wrong? Well, do you want to say something first about how the school is wrong?
I want to address the word functional. I want to address that. So first, functional communication is communicating request for object, request for action, comment on object, comment on action, requesting information, asking, answering, directing attention to yourself, protesting. Functional communication is all of those. Prove to me that they're able to do all of those. And then prove to me that they have the function of being able to be understood by their peers, their teachers, their educational assistants, their parents, their siblings, the person at the grocery store. Now you have a definition of function. But functional communication has so often been misdefined as being able to make request their preferred items. There's no definition of functional communication that matches that. The Communication Bill of Rights is a wonderful place to go for all of the communicative functions, and that can be located at ASHA, American Speech Language and Hearing Organization.org, ASHA.org, or through the World Health Organization through WHO, I think it's .gov. But just search Communication Bill of Rights, and what you find is all of the communicative functions are needed in order to be able to express all that we have the right to be able to express. So the word functional is, just makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up because it's just misdefined. Over to you, Chris.
Speak.
Of course.
Tell a story. It was at 6 years old. I was FIN finally able to talk, which BRE meant I was FI finally able to say to my older brothers and sisters to leave me alone, and also call them names that I did get yelled at by Mom for. However, that is communicating, and that is what we need to expect. So can I tell a story? It was at 6 years old. I was finally able to talk, which meant I was finally able to say to my older brothers and sisters to leave me alone, and also call the names that I did get yelled at by mom for. However, that is communicating, and that is what we need to expect.
Yeah, absolutely. We're redefining function. There's no definition of functional communication for someone who's speaking, except to be able to speak what you need to based on who you're interacting with, what your context is, what information you need to share. And until we have the same definition for symbol speakers as we do for verbal communication, we're starting out at a disadvantage. So that I would take on the whole definition of functional. First off, define how you're describing that. And now let me talk about who my child is and who all he or she needs to communicate with and in what context. And as Chris started out with earlier, really painting that picture of
And
who the student is and where they are.
for the parents, sometimes they need a picture of what is possible, that is why I do what I do, and I want to say more about that, but I know we have more questions. And for the parents, sometimes they need a picture of what is possible. That is why I do what I do. And I want to say more about that, but I know we have more questions.
Absolutely, Chris. I think that's a great segue into the next question that we have from a parent, actually. They're asking, we get the question all the time of how do we overcome we know what they want. They know, how do we overcome that? And I think they're just wanting to know how to overcome it and how to get that. Yeah.
You don't know what they want unless they are telling you. So thinking you know what they want is wrong to do. They want to tell you what they want. And before I had a communication device, my family played a guessing game. And you know what a lot of times I ended up crying on the floor because they were not able to understand me. That is why giving them language is so important. First, you don't know what they want unless they are telling you. So thinking you know what they want is wrong to do. They want to tell you what they want. And before I had a communication device, my family played a guessing game. And you know what? A lot of times I ended up crying on the floor because they were not able to understand me. That is why giving them language is so important.
There's another way to approach that too. And I agree with Chris. But if it's all about wants and needs, then you're only in that one communicative function. If I know what my child wants, then I'm not helping them to develop their comments or their questions or the asking and answering or protesting, right? Chris describes throwing himself on the floor in order to be able to protest. But it's not just about wants and needs. It's about developing the rest of that language. You know, when was the last time you just had a conversation about what you wanted or needed? We're certainly not doing that tonight online. We're talking about thoughts and ideas and feelings. And so we want to expand on when we think we know what they want. One, don't interpret it automatically as a request. You know, it's the same strategy as the 2-year-old who goes into the kitchen and points at the cabinet where you keep the cookies, right? You can say, yeah, there are cookies up there. Oh, yeah, we had cookies yesterday. Oh, I really like cookies. Oh, I think we're out of the Oreo cookies, but I know you really like vanilla wafers, right? There's much more language to go with that. But we're missing that opportunity when we're so focused on, to connect your two questions, functional communication, that we've misdefined as being requesting objects and actions. So we want to expand that language. We want to add to it. We want to give the rest of it. In the dual symbol immersion course that we've done for Hear My Voice, we do an activity where we pretend that you're going to Chipotle and ask you to decide what vocabulary you need for lunch at Chipotle. And everyone will put up on the board the different food items. Do I want a bowl, or do I want a shell, or do I want a soft shell? Do I want ground beef or a shredded chicken, right? And going through all of that. But now that you've requested what you want and you sit down at your table, what are you talking about? You're not talking about what you just ordered, unless it's really bad or really, really good, right? You're talking about, so what's been going on? What have you been up to? Did you get stuck in that traffic getting over here? I sure did, you know, I'm glad to be sitting down, man. I just really needed to get something to drink, right? We're having a conversation. That's the language we want all of our symbol speakers to have the opportunity to develop, not just about the wants and needs.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Deann.
Okay, let's return my camera on. Sorry, I'm not very technical. Okay. I asked a question in the group chat, and they asked me to share it here. I've been very blessed to have been able to work with Dr. Olenek and with Karen in getting language in the classroom very specific. And of course, we've now on day 2. And so I'm very much at that journey of now, at Chris, for your conversation earlier of dealing with the IEP and like, okay, so here's the classroom. Okay. My son is both partially verbal to be understood by strangers and then not, right? And so I want to make sure that I'm having measurable, to quote Karen, having measurable tools you know, we're having another art, you'll be proud of me, Karen, of being able to, these wonderful people, wonderful teachers who had never seen AAC before. He has a one-on-one aid with Symbolit. And I have been in the classroom with them with lunch and seeing it being used, right? But as a micromanaging mom, how can I say, okay, great, you wanna, now what you doing? That I can data and measure and get these things to ensure that outside of the home, now he's gone longer, that his language is being developed. Because tonight he was mad at me and I told him I loved him on the AAC and he said, not you, back at me, which I thought that was great.
It is. Wonderful.
But outside the house on an, because we're having the art coming up, is there realized language? I know is a platform, but is that something I should do or not? And I'll stop now. Thank you.
So are you wanting to measure your child's language as it's developing, or are you wanting to measure how much other people are speaking to him and his symbols?
I'd ask for the moon and say both. But I'm not sure how to do that. As you all were talking, I was emailing Chris, specific to your timing question. I was emailing the resource teacher saying, okay, what are we doing to make sure that the rest of the class is knows to stop talking? Let him finish, you know, but outside of that, how much interaction is happening to see, okay, he's now gained 20 words are actively being produced. Now it's 30, because she being the aide is a wonderful person. She's using Symbolit, so she's not engaging on the device. So I think we can have a capture of his generation.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're measuring an IEP because an IEP is always about the student. The IEP is not about who's implementing it. So you're not measuring goals of staff. You're actually using your child's. At the same time, when you want to make sure that the plan is being implemented. So with Symbolit, any app or application, you can look at the screen time. So you can reset the screen time for the day and you're going to know how much screen time they've had. Karen and I have talked about that in another case, that it gives you that verification. The other would be, I would think, just some spot checks where you've got your therapist or your assistive technology popping in to be able to document whether or not the technology is in use. And they've got methods for already doing that kind of data collection. The most important measure is how your student is doing in his language. And the language development milestones are the same as they are for verbal. So give me an example, give me a language sample, give me a video recording. Karen knows I'm a huge fan of video recordings. I love video recordings for IEP documentation, right? It shows you, the parent, what's going on, but it also gives you, the parent, a chance to show back to the school district what the consequences of that IEP are at home as well. So you can contribute what that expressive language is in a video back to the school as well for that documentation. It puts you on, I believe, an even playing field. The other measure for language, so language can be measured by length of utterance. It's called mean length of utterance, how long our utterances are. Language can be measured by the different meanings that we're communicating, the different communicative functions that I named earlier. Language can also be measured by the presence of those grammar markers, the past tense ed, the plural s, the progressive ing, the use of the little words in, on, under, the prepositions, the use of articles. Those are all very familiar language measures that your speech language pathologist can implement, but your teachers also address those. Teachers are documenting the presence of those parts of language for their students in the classroom. So as they're describing what's in, depending on your state, what you call those skills, but the teachers are documenting those. And so you want your child to be measured on the same standards, and those give you good descriptions of it. So the first question I would have is, how are you documenting your other students, their progression of language? Who's documenting that? Is it the teacher? Is it the SLP, or is it both? And then why can't we start there? Okay. Chris, did you have
And
anything to add?
I can add just a little to that. In the classroom, do you know, is his voice on when he is programming? And this is why I leave our mine on, so that you know I am saying something that is one thing. I have a couple of others, but I know time is a problem, and I can add just a little to that. In the classroom, do you know is his voice on when he is programming? And this is why I leave mine on, so that you know I am saying something. That is one thing. I have a couple of others, but I know time is a problem.
So to Chris's point, let me just kind of punctuate that. When you hear Chris generating his message, you know that he's in the process of creating it, but you don't respond until he said his message window, which says the whole thing, because there are pieces in there where, because of the programming, it doesn't say what it's going to say when he put it in the message window. But it's about the timing of that. Yeah. It's also about the empowerment of that. To Chris's point about having the voice turned on, we want your children to learn to control their own voice and the volume of their own voice early on. Yeah. To turn it up, to shout when they need to shout, even if they get in trouble. And I'm happy to visit the principal's office when they get in trouble. Yeah, happy to do that. And also to whisper when it's time to try and get by with something, right? It's all about the social nuances of that. But the other part of that is to help your students develop their ability to manage their own expression, right? Wait. Yeah. And Chris is saying that, or excuse me, or I have something to add, or let me add something to it. That's about social regulation. That's about developing the skills of being a good listener and being a good communication partner. I'm not a fan of teachers regulating how students need to interact with symbol speakers. I'm a fan of the symbol speaker developing their ability to advocate for themselves, because that contributes to what Chris talked about earlier, that self-advocacy, that self-determination, and being able to tell people what you like and don't like. But get the value of this. You have to have the ability to be able to protest, because even if you say no or don't, that regulates what other people do. So if you've got, somebody coming in and trying to talk on your speech generating device that you don't want, then you tell them, no, don't, go away, right? Even a single word or two word utterance, you're going to start engaging a crowd to help you get your point across. And then you develop the ability to be able to do it. But what do we want from others? And Chris, add to, expand, or change what I'm saying. What we want is the symbol speaker to have the time and the opportunity to express themselves, to be able to let others know I like or I don't like, your son saying, not love you, or, not you today, not right now. Okay, you know what? Sometimes I feel that way too. Okay, great. Thanks for telling me.
Yeah.
But I'll love you in 5 minutes, right? However you play that off. But that's really about letting people in to know what you're thinking and feeling. That's the true power of it. But it develops, and it develops in complexity, and it develops in its use with a variety of people. That's ultimately what we want to capture when we're measuring the success of our students' language.
And it's an everyday FIGH fight. I get talked to loudly and slowly. Every day. A couple of months ago. Dawn, my wife, and I were out for a walk, and somebody asked her, what is his name? So I turned around and looked, and that same person loudly and slowly said, did you hear your name? And Dawn was like, oh no, this is not going to turn out well. And she was right, because I told the person off, and it's an everyday fight. I get talked to loudly and slowly every day. A couple of months ago, Dawn, my wife, and I were out for a walk, and somebody asked her, what is his name? So I turned around and looked, and that same person loudly and slowly said, did you hear your name? And Dawn was like, oh no, this is not going to turn out well. And she was right, because I told the person off.
The power behind that, though, is that Chris got to say it for himself, right? And my mind just jumps to how often we try and program speech generating devices to say things quickly and to say complete messages. And the power, can you imagine Chris only having the ability to say, hi, my name is Chris, at that point in time, when that's really not at all what he would have meant or what he would have wanted to say. The power is in creating your own messages and being able to say, well, my name is Chris. What in the world is your name? Right? Or why do you even care? You know, but Chris is a Christian man, so I know he didn't go too far with that, right? Please tell me I'm right. Just kidding. But he needed the power, the language to be able to do what he thought.
And she told me I was you assuming something. No. Well, you were the one that talked was loudly and really slowly to me. So who assumed. First, you're right. And she told me I was assuming something. Well, you were the one that talked loudly and really slowly to me. So who assumed first?
Absolutely. All right.
Awesome. I think we just have one more question, and that's going to be from JS. So if you want to unmute and let Chris and Dr. Olina answer your question.
Yes, hello. Thank you for the inspiring all the answers. I have a child, 7 years old, with Down syndrome, and she's nonverbal. She uses gestures, sign languages, and AAC. She's using touch chat. And I agree that it's really important to use that throughout the day. And in case of my child, she has access to the device itself all day long. And in the paper and in the meeting, everyone agrees aided language input is really important, and they will do that. However, during the last school year, I checked the screen time, and I can see it's only used in certain time, which I think they have a structured activity for that. But it's not really used throughout the day. So my question is it really possible in the real classroom to have a aided language input by the teacher if my child doesn't have a one-on-one aid?
Those are great questions. So can I ask a couple of additional questions before we answer that? The vocabulary set on your touch chat, I'm hoping it's touch chat HD with word power. Is that correct?
Yes, it's 60 basic.
Okay, great. So you have the vocabulary, you have language, you have enough vocabulary available to be able to start creating. How complex sentences does your child speak on the speech generating device?
Right now, she's only doing two word sentence, and it's mostly the requesting, like eat something, drink something, play with something.
Okay. So, and Chris, please feel free to chime in. One, I think it's difficult from the front of the classroom for a teacher to be holding the student's attention and providing the language input in multiple symbol systems or even a second symbol system. I think there are challenges with that. It doesn't mean it's impossible to do. It needs to be an effort. The effort needs to be on the side of one, whoever the communication partners are, they need to develop their skills with the speech generating device. So that would be one of the first questions that I would look at. Who's helping the teacher to learn how to navigate to the vocabulary and to develop the teacher's own ability? If your child is speaking at a 2-word utterance, at the very least, you would like people giving more language input than what she's able to express, and for more reasons. The fact that you've got primarily requesting objects is something that I would talk with your speech pathologist in your team about what the expectations are, and that may be a place to go looking on your IEP as well, to see what are the goals, so that you make sure that you've got goals that support all of that language development. Commenting, asking, answering, protesting, all of those different meanings for communication. The other, and this is a personal belief, I believe that children need to be immersed in the language, English. In the case, you're speaking English to me, I'm speaking English back to you, but we would immerse your child in English, spoken language, because your child lives in a hearing environment and hears the speech generating device producing speech as well as others speaking, and in the symbol system. And that is the aided language stimulation that you're talking about. Too often, aided language stimulation or any of the other language stimulation aided language, they end up being pinholed into a specific controllable activity. And when that happens, then you get the limitations that you're describing. We want people to understand that language is for all of those different reasons, and that we also need the symbol input when it comes to the educational instruction. So how are the educational instructional components being addressed in the symbols? Those would be some of the questions I would want to come back to the teacher and the assistive technology team and the speech pathologist and ask for clarification of how they're doing that. But you really want a plan for people to develop their proficiency. Carolyn spoke of Symbolit and using Symbolit in the classroom as well as at home. It gives you a way to translate your speech, your spoken language, into picture symbols in real time. It is not meant to replace us speaking on the child's speech generating device, but it gives us a way from the front of the classroom, and also for students, classmates who may not be proficient in our child's speech generating device. It gives others a way to be able to speak to our students in symbols. And so we want to look at what are the tools that we have, and what's the experience and the instruction that the communication partners, particularly the educators, need to receive in order for them to speak in our student symbol system. Chris, do you have something to add to that?
I would just add this. What are their and your expectations for her? If they want, they are low, she is going to do the M-I-M. Littlest. Asterisk K. She can do to get what she wants. So if she is wanting something, you can C-H-T talk. Back and say, Yes, that was fun to do. And Deann shared. Yes. Earlier, too, I would just add this. What are there any expectations for her? If they are low, she is going to do the littlest she can do to get what she wants. So if she is wanting something, you can talk back and say, yes, that was fun to do. And Deann shared this earlier too.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think we are right now, what Chris like before said, that in a guessing game, because she kind of points to something and I keep asking, is it this, is it that? So
So what I would do in those cases is when she points, I would just come back on her speech generating device and I would say, I think you are telling me, and don't make it all requests. I think you are telling me, I see that. I like that. I did that yesterday. Do you have that? Can I have that? What does that do? Right? Just at a variety of conversational. I think the greatest pitfall, and I truly see it as just this hole in the ground, is the wants and needs that we think that, and we overinterpret that everything is about something that they want. But that they see it, they had it, they wonder how it works, just really play with all of those other interpretations of it. But then you can come back and state what you think it is. I think you're telling me, and then give them a model on their speech generating device. It gives us a way to be able to pour that symbol language in so that our children see us using the symbols and they get a chance to hear and see them being made visible. We don't speak on the speech generating device enough. And many of our students don't have anybody speaking to them on their speech generating device. We slide it in front of them and we expect that we're going to speak verbally and they'll figure it out. And we just made developing language more difficult. We need to be speaking in their symbol throughout the day.
Okay. One more. 8, 9. Story. And I kind of shared it earlier, but not really. So my brothers, and sisters liked to use my communication device to, okay, one more story. And I kind of shared it earlier, but not really. So my brothers and sisters like to use my communication device too. However, they would program the longest sentence, calling each other NB names on it. So that was fun to do. And that is partly how I learned that first device. 1, it was fun. 2, somebody else was doing it too. However, they would program a longest sentence calling each other names on it. So that was fun to do. And that is probably how I learned it first. Device. 1, it was fun. 2, somebody else was doing it too.
You know, I think it kind of bringing us to summation on the questions. You know, Chris has a phrase that he uses a lot, and that is, if it's not fun, it's not language. Language is a lot of fun, and language is the way we relate, we play, we interact, we socialize. It's the way we protest and we engage, and, you know, making it fun, but model, speak on the speech generating device so that your child will develop language. Look at who else is involved. You really want everyone involved in the developing of language. And that's where, you know, we've talked about speaking on the speech generating device. We also talk about speaking on a mirror device or a duplicate device, looking for other tools. What are our academic tools? What are our class curriculum tools that bring the symbols into the classroom instruction? And then we have the tool of Symbol-It to be able to translate. We need all of the tools, and there's just this great need for us to be able to promote language development through augmentative communication devices for symbol speakers in the same way that we develop verbal language. And the more we relate it to verbal language development, the expectations of verbal language development, the more you and I already know what that trajectory is. We already know what comes next because we have a model for that. And you know, Chris gives us a great vision for that language for a lifetime. You've heard him telling stories and sharing and relating thoughts, ideas, and feelings and hopes and dreams, you know, and building our understanding. And that's truly the power of language. And that's truly why it's important to hear from Chris himself.
Using AAC for 42 years. I believe I know more than the so called EXPER experts. And I'm not afraid to say that I have been using AAC for 42 years. I believe I know more than the so-called experts, and I'm not afraid to say that.
Aaron, will you remove that from the description of me, please, in the... Chris, I'm not in that category, am I? Please say no.
No, you aren't. No, you aren't.
Tell me if I was. Tell me if I was. Yeah. But Karen, seriously, remove the expert from it.
I can't remove that. That is gold. I'm going to make a t-shirt out of it, Chris. Chris and Karen said.
Oh.
Yeah.
So again, we can't thank you enough. We certainly are going to have Chris and Dr. Olenek back on. I know you guys have a million questions, and we are so thankful for your input. Again, if you want to reach Dr. Olenek, you can reach her at www.languagethroughaac.org. If you want to reach Chris, you can reach him at lessonsfromthebigtoe.com. And before you know it, we're going to get Chris on TikTok, and then we'll really be stirring up some trouble. So again, we thank you all. And remember, we have one mission, and our mission is when we get it right for the child, we get it right for everybody. And thank you so much. If you have any other questions, just reach out to us at admin@specialeducationacademy.com. And we'll see you guys in the next video.
Thank you.